Good afternoon. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone, to the afternoon session of our Spectrum Management Task Force meeting today. Per the agenda, most of the afternoon will be spent in hearing presentations from the industry stakeholders that participate in the work of the task force. I'd probably ask if our chairman, Mr. Alvin Augustine, is available. Are you there, Alvin? He was called away this morning and came back in late, so I think I would nonetheless seek to press ahead, Ms. Vice Chair, if that's okay, with respect to the agenda, because it's several presentations and not too much time. So per the agenda, our first presentation this afternoon will come from Viasat. The presenter is Ms. Amy Millman. She is the Vice President of U.S. Government Affairs and Policy for Viasat. And she's going to present to us on some issues related to non-geostationary satellite constellations. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe she'll be concentrating not so much on the specific technical or spectrum related matters, but more on environmental and logistical issues. So Amy, you weren't with us this morning, so maybe you can come in and introduce yourself. And
I am. Thank you. I am here. I appreciate your introduction. I am going to touch a little bit on spectrum, but not too much. A little bit about the variety of issues that we're talking about. So let me see if I can bring up my presentation here and tell me if it's working. Yeah.
Yes, we are seeing it. It's not in presentation mode yet, but
I will go in presentation mode, hopefully. Yeah. Good?
Yes, it's good.
Okay, wonderful. All right. So first of all, I want to thank you and the CITU Secretary General Taylor for having us, as well as Alvin and Dr. Maria Myers Hamilton, of course. We are excited to be here. And I have to say that I'm particularly excited to be here because, my father moved down to the Caribbean about, well, I don't want to say how many years ago because that would date me, but let's just say a long time ago when I was a little girl. And I certainly know, the challenges in the Caribbean that we face, just from being on small islands, for example, and making sure that we have communications more generally, but, resilient networks that are going to be able to withstand hurricanes and the like. So I really appreciate the opportunity and just getting to talk to you about some of these issues. So heading in, just to give you an overview of Isaf, for those who don't know, we really want to connect the world. Obviously, CITU is incredibly important to us. We think we can offer a lot in the region, and we've done a lot in the region. But we have a global presence, and we are going to be launching a couple more satellites that I'll get to in a minute. That will get to this global connectivity. But from an aero, maritime, and also land perspective, we're looking to do it all and make sure that we get adoption, digital literacy, and all of that to a level that makes sense for everybody and in an affordable way. So these are the connections that we have. Certainly, as I mentioned, the home, schooling, educational, telemedicine, all of these different verticals are incredibly important to us. And we look forward to working with you guys on them. As I mentioned, we are going to be launching 3 additional satellites over the next couple of years to give us a global presence. And with that, again, we've been really trying to drive down the cost per bit so that everybody can be connected again in an affordable way. So as I mentioned, we've been pretty active in CITU, trying to make sure that we have all the necessary regulatory authority to do, what we want to do down there to help the citizens of the various countries down there. But just wanted to give a quick case study. We in the midst of a pandemic, somehow we were able to install about 100 sites in Jamaica, connected a whole bunch of schools, and we're looking to continue that throughout the region, and partner with some other countries if at all possible. We want to make sure that we are certainly getting students connected and the islands more broadly. So as we know, we're in a new era here, a new space era. There's a lot going on. Certainly, we are, as I mentioned, developing satellites, ultra high throughput satellites that are that will have over a terabit of capacity themselves. We have NGSO systems that are launching today and have been launching, which is all great. I mean, I think that is really good for the industry. I think it's good for, those who are not connected more generally, and I'm excited to be a part of it. But with that, obviously, there are challenges. Certainly, we're working in the ITU to address these challenges, but technology, in some respects, is sort of getting a little bit ahead of regulation, as we often see. So I think we need to figure out ways to address some of these issues, address some of the GSO and NGSO sharing policies, making sure that everybody has access to the limited spectrum and orbital resources in an equitable manner. And certainly we want to make sure that we don't have any, great risk to these orbits, because, from a satellite perspective, either you're going up into LEO, you want to coexist, or you're traversing through to get to MEO or GEO. And those are, critical. It's a critical space that we keep clean, and, everybody is able to traverse, as well as, human spaceflight. We have looked a little bit at some of the interference issues, some of the, as mentioned, the environmental issues. And again, we want to get to a place where we can all coexist and make sure that, all of our businesses can, provide the services that that we've talked about and other companies have talked about. So just on the spectrum side, we've had rules in place for quite some time from a frequency sharing perspective when it comes to NGSO and GSO satellites, but they were kind of developed a long time ago, as I mentioned. Couple decades ago, based on systems like teledesic that were at most going to be about 840 satellites. Well, that's not even near what we're talking about today when it comes to some of the systems that are being licensed today. They're going to have tens of thousands of satellites. So I think we kind of need to think about how we are going to address these situations where you might have different interference scenarios, and ensure that even before we deal with it at the ITU, we're dealing with it at the national level, so that your national resources, your systems that you already have, are protected. So GeoArc, this is what they were looking to protect in the first place. There is a lot of discussion in the ITU on this and how we deal with some of the interference scenarios. And what we've been discussing with several folks around the world really is, how are we going to deal with this in at very least the short term? And we've looked at various ways of dealing with these interference issues, and found that, frankly, the simplest way to do it, and the simplest way to manage it from a regulatory perspective, is angular avoidance of the GSO arc. In the GEO world, it was pretty easy, right? You just, you avoided the GSO arc. You point your Earth station a particular way toward your particular satellite, fairly simple. But when it comes to, when it comes to GSO and NGSO, it's a little bit more of a complicated situation. So I think depending on, the location of the GSOs and the NGSOs around the world geographically, I think we're just going to have to look at, what particular avoidance angle might be necessary to employ in order to have everybody coexist. And I think in this regard, it's actually fairly easy. It's just a matter of measuring what makes sense. So just to wrap that little piece up, I think we want to make sure that, we are discussing these issues at the regulatory national level to make sure that we protect the systems that are there, protect the systems both on the NGSO and the GSO side from a capacity standpoint. Employing angular separation should be fairly straightforward and something that can be implemented easily with little impact on the NGSO systems, but allow for GSO systems to have the protection that they've been certainly used to and should have going forward. Another little interesting issue is that the way the EPFD rules work at the ITU and the way the systems, as far as filing these various systems that are larger go, some systems have to file multiple ITU filings. It's not a shocking thing. It just happens to be that because of the software systems, you can only do so many at a time. So you have to have multiple filings to actually create your constellation. Well, it sort of creates an interesting conundrum where the regulator has to make sure that an operator is not double dipping per se in from an EPFD perspective. So just because you have multiple filings for technical reasons doesn't necessarily mean you can have multiple times the EPFD for purposes of interference, right? So we want to ensure that that doesn't happen. And the aggregate issue is something that I think we need to look at as well, where, it's not only this, one constellation up in LEO, it's multiple constellations, and it's potentially tens of thousands of them. And what is that going to look like? So I think these are just things that we're going to have to address going forward. And we look forward to working with them on you. I think we just need to sort of put it out there because it's not necessarily being discussed as quickly as I think we need to, given the situation that we're dealing with as far as the rapid advances in technology and the launches. From an NGSO perspective, there's some concern about the large number of satellites in one constellation and what that means for smaller systems. There's several smaller systems that exist for whatever reason they decided to have larger, more capable satellites in order to transmit over a large body of land. And that's their choice. It's totally fine. But unfortunately, depending on how this all plays out, if you have thousands or tens of thousands of satellites and you're operating on a co-frequency basis, you may have significant interference and not necessarily enough diversity of satellites to go to if you are a smaller system. So again, it's just trying to figure out how we adjust our policies to make sure that one operator, two operators don't have complete ability to blank the sky and not allow others to coexist. Orbital resources, obviously another problem as well. It's still in flux. We have no idea what the world is going to look like as far as LEO goes. There's certainly a lot of interest in it. There are policies that are being put in place, licenses that are being granted in a variety of countries that, are allowing for particular operators to claim a decent amount of real estate when it comes to these LEO orbits. One operator in the US has been given the ability to operate from about 510 kilometers to 580 kilometers with a 30-kilometer tolerance. So essentially at 540 to 560 or 70, but with an orbital tolerance that allows it to be a larger space. I think we need to tighten that up to allow others to coexist. Hopefully we'll have SSA and STM functions to make sure that we all coexist together in a peaceful way and way that, doesn't cause further collision and allows multiple operators to compete. But there is a concern about, sort of a blocking situation, again, from an orbital physical standpoint. And then exactly what you were mentioning before, Nigel, which is the environmental. We want to make sure that we do not have a disaster in space. We want to make sure that we have reliable satellites that can maneuver. We need to make sure that we prevent a situation that is, going to cause a problem going forward. I mean, you can see in this middle part here, there was a collision in about 2009 where a Russian satellite and an Iridium satellite collided, and the rapid increase in debris you'll see in this sort of step increase here, where it started to become a problem. Well, this doesn't even get to the 1,500 satellites where we have just been launching them in 2020 and 2021. Not to say that those satellites aren't, necessarily, not to say that they're a problem per se right now, but if it's not managed in a way where they can actually maneuver and there are no failures, we may have a situation where there are out of control satellites that do collide, and that collision causes the debris that you'll see on the right-hand side, which is potentially affecting hundreds of kilometers above and below, which affects not only other satellites being able to be in these orbits, traverse these orbits, but also all the other, again, as I said before, human space flight situations that we all want to see happen. So there's been some discussion of, hey, well, these satellites in these orbits, one of the reasons everybody goes here is because there's a rapid decay time. Well, there is a decay time, there is a rapid decay time, and that's all well and good, but for the 5 to 7 years that a satellite may or may not be maneuvering the way it should, those who are having to coexist in that space, have a problem. Because they are going to have to figure out how to either avoid or, hope that that other satellite or those other satellites are not going to collide with each other. And as mentioned before, these satellites, if they do collide, can spew debris hundreds of kilometers on either side. And if you look at the debris decay times, essentially, those are much longer. So 13.7 years at 550, 650 kilometers, 17.8 years, it becomes an issue and something that is not going to resolve itself fairly quickly. And even the beauty of the astro scales and clear spaces and other cleanup providers, that's all well and good. I think that's absolutely worth pursuing. But even those cleanup crews, as I call it, might not be able to get up there to actually do their job. They're looking to take down large pieces of debris, not necessarily, it's not like a broom up in space. So, better that we prevent these issues in the first instance than have to clean up later. Harder to do in space. So how do we do this? I think we need to figure out how to, put policies in place where you can actually reduce the probability that you're actually going to have a collision in the first instance. So put rules in place that say, for example, for the constellation as a whole, you want 1 in 1,000 chance of the constellation as a whole having a failure and or possibly colliding. That then gets us to an ecosystem where satellite providers or manufacturers are building equipment that will actually meet that level of performance, be able to maneuver, make sure that you can, deorbit your satellites before you actually have a failure, or you get a warning light, you have some way to remediate the situation to meet that level of reliability. Those are the policies that we've been pushing because, with the rapid advances in technology, we think we can do it. And we think we can have a number of different systems coexisting, which is all good for the consumer. So as I mentioned, if you are looking at policies and what to actually promote, the traditional policy that we've had from a geo perspective, it made sense. When you're assessing a single satellite and the potential collision risk, you can look at the one satellite in geo, for example, and assume that you're not going to have a lot of potential conjunctions. You might have a failure, but it's not going to necessarily affect thousands of other satellites, for example, or the debris in the orbit in geo. When you have thousands or tens of thousands of satellites in LEO, assessing a single satellite in that constellation alone each time doesn't make sense. You're going to want to assess the situation as a whole. And if you don't, if you have, for example, 10,000 satellites, what you're predicting is one collision every 180 days based on a NASA DAS model. And that's not acceptable. I mean, I think we need to figure out ways to ensure that that won't happen again in the first instance. So, what are we suggesting to everybody? Figure out a way to put some policies in place and then figure out how companies can, get into compliance, even if there's a failure. Obviously, there are going to be failures. There are going to be situations where we have to, figure things out, but we want to figure out how to get people into compliance as well. So just to sum things up, I think we want to I know we want to work with all of you to figure out how we define some of these spectrum use parameters in this new space world, figure out how we can all, benefit from these different orbits, and how we prevent collisions and set some policies in place where we can actually prevent any, issue with actually occupying LEO or any other, satellite orbits in the future. So, whoops, no, nothing to consider deleting. Would you like to delete something? No, I really appreciate you guys having me. And I think the last thing I would say is we've had some discussions in CITU on this. We look to continue to having these discussions and at the national level, and hope that, if there's anything that we can provide from a technical perspective, that you certainly reach out to us in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. I have a question though, sure. In terms of the regulatory response. Where is the most effective regulatory response to be had? Is it at the international level, like for example, our inputs to ITU fora, or at the national level? Because I'm not, certainly within the Caribbean, I'm not aware of any of us planning to put constellations up, even though I know Mauritius did recently, put something up recently. So how would you suggest we most effectively address this? Because I understand it's an aggregate issue now, that in addition to or beyond just individual satellites.
Yeah. So I think we can look at it from a market access perspective. I think, if I'm in the Caribbean, I want multiple operators to be able to come to my country, figure out ways to, serve my people, I don't want it occupied by one particular, company, or, have anybody blocking out my ability from potentially doing it, themselves. So I think it has to be a parallel process. I think it has to be, looked at from a market access perspective. And I think it also needs to be looked at the ITU more generally. But unfortunately, the ITU, we have 2 to 4 year processes, right? And thousands of satellites are going up now. So I think we want to ensure that we actually have the ability to, we certainly want to have the ability to access these orbits in the future, as do others, I'm sure, and serve you guys in the Caribbean.
So maybe if we get applications from operators for licenses to operate services in our territory, you're suggesting that we should be aware of some of the questions we should be asking.
Absolutely. What is it, is there an interference issue? Are we going to be able to have multiple operators? How will this system work such that, we can ensure that? There are a number of questions. I mean, I didn't get into too much detail here, but there are the interference issues. There are the, debris issues. I know they're a little bit more technical, but I think they can all be managed fairly easily at the market access stage. It's just thinking about it, right? And digging in a little bit, and ensuring that you guys actually have the ability to access multiple operators.
Okay, and where might we get more information about this issue? Is it CITU or elsewhere?
Well, I'm happy to provide more information. We've done several studies, but CITU, yes, we put in an information paper into CITU. And we were thinking actually about doing a seminar as well, if they'll have us. So we can dig in a little bit more on these issues.
All right, thank you. Alvin, are you there yet?
Yeah, I'm here, Nigel. Yes.
All right. Okay. Good.
I'm back.
Good. Okay. I don't know if you or we do have a lot of presentations, but
yeah,
if there's anything that we anything else that we might want to ask Amy before she finishes?
Nigel?
Yes. Lindell?
Oh, this is Rodney.
Oh, this is Rodney. Oh, okay.
This is a quick question. I know there are a lot of presentations. I'm hearing an echo. I'm not sure if you're hearing me clearly.
I hear you clearly.
Okay, good. So you are presented on behalf of Viasat, that's correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I'm not sure if Viasat is in the low Earth orbiting satellite business.
Good question. We are. We actually, that's a very good question. I probably should have said that at the beginning. So we have a license. I should say we have a license for a MEO and a modification application at the FCC for a low Earth orbiting satellite constellation. And we also build them. We build them for others and ground systems for others. So we're pretty deep into this in every way.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So forgive any background noise that you're hearing. But yeah, it seems to me that sort of is the next generation type of satellite connectivity if we're talking about broadband and low latency. So I was just curious if you're in that space, or what you saw that as sort of competing with your business model, and how that would help us inform policy.
No, I appreciate that. I think they both have their place. I think, from a geo perspective, we think the bandwidth economics are better, to be perfectly frank, but there are some applications from, that require a low latency connection. And in that, I think there's certainly a complementary role that the LEO plays. Certainly there are folks that are doing this as they're in business alone. But I do think that it's an ecosystem, right? So I do think that GEOs and LEOs and MEOs along with terrestrial systems, are all important going forward. So we're looking at both, but we do think that ultimately, right now, what we're seeing is just the business model from a economic standpoint is probably still better in the geo sector.
Got you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I think the message certainly is what's the aggregate impact of all these systems going up, and make sure that we evaluate them properly and set appropriate parameters so that we can get the multiple operators and the multiple options, LEO, MEO, and GEO going forward. So, well, thank you very much, Amy.
Thank you so much.
Quite educational for us. I think we'll take it on board in terms of our thinking going forward. And
hi, Nigel. This is Ardani from Court for
yes,
OneWeb.
Yes, Ardani.
I don't quite have a question. I just quite have a comment. I do think there are some missing information from this document. You know, in my opinion, I think, like Amy said, you know, the LEO, they are in the business of LEO as well, and I do think, you know, so there should be some education.
Yeah.
This group as well.
Just to say, I mean, I know OneWeb well, and I work with a lot of your colleagues well, and definitely think that OneWeb is a great company and something that, you know, should be, you know, an option for sure. And I think my point was that all these operators should be able to coexist and flourish and provide services in these various countries.
Yeah,
I agree. And if anyone is interested in really knowing more about LEOs, one would be happy to actually, especially members of this, you know, committee, the task force, we would be happy to actually do a presentation as well to actually give you guys some more information how great LEO can be to the Caribbean, especially to provide services in the remote places as well that GEO probably can't. You know, I do think there's a lot of information in this presentation that is being used as somewhat of a scale tactics.
I disagree. I disagree. I think it's raised an issue which we've which we've noted, right? And what we're looking for is more information.
Agreed.
Right.
Agreed.
We would be welcome and open to other presentations. And in fact, in this very meeting, there are competing interests that are making presentations. So we are looking for information. So if not today, certainly at a future meeting, we could hear from other quarters.
Okay, thank you, Nigel.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thanks, Amy. We'll go here now something from the Wi-Fi Alliance. I would like to welcome Mr. Alex Reutblatt. He is the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs for the Wi-Fi Alliance. And he's going to talk to us about Wi-Fi 6E. We all have this national imperative to deploy and expand meaningful broadband connectivity. So Alex is going to talk to us about what the Wi-Fi Alliance contribution to that could be. Alex, please go ahead.
Thank you, Nigel, and thank you, CITU, for this opportunity to come back and share with you some of the exciting developments and challenges that are in being presented in a Wi-Fi ecosystem. And as you can see, I titled my presentation of connecting everyone and everything everywhere, because Wi-Fi is truly a universal technology, because be it developing countries or developed countries, be it connectivity provided by satellite or fiber or copper or some wireless connectivity, 5G to 2G, all these technologies, all these connectivity technologies converge on Wi-Fi, because Wi-Fi is the predominant way that we connect to the internet. And so that's why it's so important, I think, for us to follow this, and for us to share ideas on how to ensure that Wi-Fi continues to provide this type of connectivity. And so before I continue, I assume you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, good. Just quickly before I get into the main presentation, just a little bit about Wi-Fi Alliance. We are an association of over 850 companies from all around the world, from every aspect of Wi-Fi ecosystem that are focused on delivering connectivity, but also compatibility of Wi-Fi devices. So when your latest smartphone can continue to communicate with an access point you may have purchased a decade ago, that's due to the industry efforts to ensure this compatibility among the multitude of Wi-Fi devices. So with that, the plan for my presentation would be today is to discuss some of the socioeconomic aspects of Wi-Fi and the benefits that it delivers. And then I just wanted to touch quickly on the role that Wi-Fi plays in the infrastructure, the communications infrastructure for the Caribbean and worldwide, and also in mitigating the COVID pandemic. Obviously, it's difficult to ignore since we're all right now. And then I'll share some updates on the latest technological developments in Wi-Fi, which is the Wi-Fi 6E technology, and touch upon the spectrum needs and share some conclusions with you. So with that, first let's look at the socioeconomic benefits of Wi-Fi technology. So Wi-Fi Alliance has analyzed this value of Wi-Fi. Sorry, my presentation is going faster than I am. And I'm not going to go into great detail on the study, but what's amazing is that Wi-Fi is projected to deliver over $5 trillion of value worldwide, just on an annual basis, by almost $3 trillion of value. Again, this is an enormous amount of value that's being derived by consumers worldwide in developing countries and in every aspect of communication infrastructure. So, and how does this value come about? Well, there are three components. The consumer surplus, and that is the value we all derive. So, for example, I'm speaking to you right now via Wi-Fi. I'm sure that many participants in this conference are also using Wi-Fi for this connectivity. They're deriving value from that. And just to give you a quick example, I asked my daughter the other day, how much would I have to pay her to give up Wi-Fi for 1 year? She told me $1 million. $1 million is, but the fact is, if you ask yourself, well, how much would it cost you to give up Wi-Fi for a year? I think that number would be significant, and that's the consumer value that we're all realizing. And then, of course, the producer surplus, the producers, everything from a local coffee shop that offers free Wi-Fi and thereby attracts customers, to the factories where Wi-Fi is managing assembly lines. They're realizing this benefit as well. And then the GDP contribution is obvious. They're the goods and services that are being exchanged for Wi-Fi. So in aggregate, this is a significant benefit to everyone. And here's the breakdown of the economic value drivers. Again, I will not spend a whole lot of time on this, but just to emphasize that most of the value, as you can see, is coming from residential Wi-Fi. The fact that you don't have to run wires to every corner of your house to have connectivity, and yet you can enjoy the connectivity wherever you are, whether you at home or whether you go into a hotel room or anywhere else. That ubiquitous connectivity is of significant value, and as I can see, there are other major components, but in the interest of time, I will skip over them. But in addition to the economics, there are significant social values that are delivered by Wi-Fi. So for education or home or logistics, that's all being recognized, and now more than ever, especially during the pandemic when we have telemedicine, telelearning, everything, Zoom calls. Wi-Fi is definitely keeping us connected during this challenging time, and then of course the social value of just being connected to your friends and family. Again, using this inexpensive technology, inexpensive from the standpoint of equipment, and also inexpensive from the standpoint of getting the connectivity. And of course, the community value of having various communities come together and being able to connect via Wi-Fi. I was talking to a friend in a developing country where he actually lives in a village where he has the only connectivity for the entire village. And he was complaining to me that all the kids are coming to his house. So there are like 30 kids in the village, all coming to his house to do homework via Wi-Fi, because he, again, is the only one who has that connectivity. But just think how important that is for that community. So, so the role of Wi-Fi in the telecom infrastructure in COVID pandemic has been analyzed in detail, but given the pandemic is still ongoing and the statistics are somewhat of a rear view mirror look, these are being developed, but I think that the numbers are quite impressive, which I wanted to share with you. So first, as far as the Wi-Fi delivering the connectivity. What's interesting is that by next year, Wi-Fi will deliver over 50% of all the internet traffic. Again, traffic generated everything from satellites to cellular to fiber to whatever mode of connectivity there is. The last 20 feet or so will be delivered by Wi-Fi. So that is pretty amazing that the world realized that much on Wi-Fi for connectivity. And as you can see, these numbers continue to grow, and they're actually growing even faster in developing countries. And then as far as the introduction of 5G, I know we're all excited and focused on that happening, but keep in mind the traffic offload continues to grow on Wi-Fi. So every time we're within the Wi-Fi coverage, the users tend to switch from the cellular network to Wi-Fi. And as you can see, what projections are that for the 5G deployments, 71% of that traffic will be carried over Wi-Fi. So I think the networks, the cellular networks, would simply not be able to function without availability of Wi-Fi. And that's why it's important to ensure that Wi-Fi doesn't experience degradation in performance. And I'll get into that in a second. Here are some statistics on the COVID pandemic. As you can see, the use of Wi-Fi has really skyrocketed. The average daily use has gone up. The activity has gone up almost 100%. Upstream traffic gone up over 100%, and that's obvious because, as I was explaining, I'm on Wi-Fi right now, talking to you via video. I'm uploading a lot of data, and that's all over Wi-Fi. So we're seeing significant significant use of Wi-Fi, and it continues to grow. And if this is the new normal, then we need to make sure that Wi-Fi continues to work. This chart I think is important. It shows the number of active devices that operate simultaneously at the same time, and how that number has changed over time for during the pandemic. As you can see, the number of devices has gone up from average of around 3 to an average of 4 to 5 devices. Now, keep in mind, these devices, all of them operating simultaneously, cannot access the same channel. They need additional spectrum. The more devices, the more channels you need, and that's just obvious. But here is the problem. The Wi-Fi, the way the Wi-Fi operates, it's a self-coordinating system based on contention-based protocol. We don't operate in a pre-assigned spectrum, so increasing the number of devices, increasing the amount of data is needed, then the channels continue to be occupied. But the devices require separation from each other so that they don't step on each other's channels. And to achieve that separation, you need significant distances, or you need more spectrum. So obviously distances are not an option. As I sit here talking to you surrounded by Wi-Fi devices, I can't really throw some of them away by 200 meters or more. But what I can do is access different channels, and that is the only solution that will ensure that there would be continuous connectivity and performance in Wi-Fi without the degradation. And speaking of degradation, this is a very important slide. So this shows the degradation and performance during the pandemic. And as you can see, we're experiencing degradation in quality of service delivered by Wi-Fi. It has gone up to 200% during the pandemic, because again, the usage has increased, the traffic has increased, the demand has increased, and the number of devices have gone up. So with all that, we can't continuously rely on the amount of spectrum that was made available 20-some years ago and maintain this type of connectivity, where we're looking for real-time video, high quality, 4K, 8K video connectivity, virtual reality, all those things, and of course, just the connectivity that we use Wi-Fi for. So just to kind of put a point on this, so the increased number of devices and data traffic and all that increase that I just discussed exhausts the available spectrum capacity. So without additional spectrum, we are seeing, and we should expect to continue to see, degradation in Wi-Fi performance. So something needs to be done, and the good news is something is being done. Countries around the world are moving to make 6 gigahertz band available for Wi-Fi. In the meantime, the industry has stepped up and introduced the next generation Wi-Fi called Wi-Fi 6E. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it, but the fact that the 6 gigahertz was made available, it's significantly more spectrum than what Wi-Fi had when it was just a nascent technology 20 years ago, and some spectrum was made available for it. And so the industry has recognized the important step that regulators around the world, again, in the Americas, Asia Pacific, Europe, Middle East, have taken to ensure Wi-Fi reliability. And I hope that CITU regulators will also take note of this and will ensure that Wi-Fi continues to deliver the value and the benefits that are being provided. As far as the Wi-Fi 6E technology, it is specifically designed for the modern age, where we're relying on video connectivity, on higher speeds, lower latency, ensuring power consumption is limited so that the batteries last longer, and basically having advanced connectivity experiences. I will definitely share this presentation with all of you, but I would encourage you to go to the slide that there are links to Wi-Fi 6E video, and you can get more information on Wi-Fi 6E technology. And why all this is important, why spectrum is so critical, is because we need those wider channels to ensure gigabit connectivities. Countries around the world are looking to establish a gigabit connectivity as a telecom goal. It has been a goal for a while in a number of countries, but now more and more countries are implementing that. They're using satellites or fiber or some other way to deliver this connectivity. But then Wi-Fi becomes the bottleneck because that's how users prefer to access this capability. But without sufficient spectrum, without 160 megahertz channels, that connectivity is simply not being realized, and the consumers and businesses may not even be aware that they're paying for connectivity to come to their premises, but at the end of the day, they're not getting it because the Wi-Fi capacity, the spectrum capacity, is limited. So with that's why the regulators are focusing on the 6 gigahertz band, which is the 5925 to 7125 megahertz band. And the big question right now, debated among the regulators and touches upon the WRC 23, is should it be 1200 megahertz of spectrum or only 500? So in Europe, the initial decision by the regulators was for 500 megahertz of spectrum. As you can see, that would provide Wi-Fi. This is the 802.11 channelization. This 500 megahertz provides Wi-Fi with 360 megahertz channels, which doesn't really provide sufficient amount of channel diversity. Because again, if you have multiple devices, if it's not just you, but you're surrounded by friends and family members who are also on Wi-Fi, who are also downloading video or uploading streaming video, the 3 channels may not be sufficient to maintain this type of connectivity. And what's important is, again, Wi-Fi being a dynamic random spectrum technology, the way that they access spectrum, they may not be able to access the spectrum because of the higher noise floor that is being generated when there's only limited channel availability. And the future of Wi-Fi is Wi-Fi 7. We're already working on the next generation of Wi-Fi, which will operate in 320 megahertz channels. So how many 320 megahertz channels can we fit into 500 megahertz? Not that many, you know. There's only this many 320s in 500. So that's why regulators around the world have focused on the 1200 megahertz model, and particularly in the Americas, where we are seeing Canada, US, Brazil, and a number of other countries go for this 1200 megahertz model, which would accommodate 760 megahertz channels. That's the channel diversity that Wi-Fi needs to maintain the user expectations and performance. And this is a chart of showing you how countries are progressing. So what you see in dark green are the countries that have already taken the decision to make the 1200 megahertz available. And as you can see, I'm not sure if someone trying to speak here, but as you can see, countries in the Americas are leading the world in making this decision, and hopefully countries in the Caribbean can join our continent in moving forward. So just for the conclusions, yeah, I highlighted to you that the benefits, the social and economic benefits that are delivered by Wi-Fi, so I will not go into that. But also keep in mind that 6 gigahertz is uniquely suited for Wi-Fi. This is where the Wi-Fi will grow for the next 20 to 30 years. So we don't take these decisions on spectrum allocations just for today. We take these decisions for the next decade or more. And there is no alternative spectrum. So if no spectrum becomes available for Wi-Fi, or if only a limited amount of spectrum is available for Wi-Fi, then this amazing technology has no place to grow, and that would certainly be a problem. So the Wi-Fi depends on the future of Wi-Fi, and the future of connectivity, as much as we all rely on it, depends on the availability of the spectrum. I also wanted to highlight to you that Wi-Fi 6E equipment is already available on the market. This year alone, we expect that the industry will deliver over 300 million Wi-Fi 6E devices. They are being deployed in countries in our region already. So that is significant. And so I will urge the regulators and policymakers in this forum to consider allowing Wi-Fi 6E, which is the 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi deployments. Just wanted to conclude on WRC 23 agenda item 1.2. I know Carmela will go in more detail on this issue, but portion of the 6 gigahertz spectrum is being considered under this agenda item 1.2. But what's important to think about is that many countries, as I have shown you, have already concluded that IMT deployment in this band, in the 6 gigahertz band, is not feasible. It's not possible to share or coexist with incumbents in the 6 gigahertz, either satellite uplinks, which are operating there, or the fixed microwave services. So some of the ideas that are being pondered around in the discussions in ITU are to make IMT available only in the metropolitan areas. That's not a feasible solution. Or allow IMT small cells to operate indoors only at 200 milliwatts, basically replicating what Wi-Fi is already delivering. That's not a feasible IMT model. That's not a 5G model. And obviously, it's much more expensive to have an IMT or a 5G small cell doing the job that can be accomplished by inexpensive Wi-Fi equipment. Relocation of the incumbent services in the band, not feasible. FSS uplinks, Appendix 30B, which is critical for developing countries, cannot be replaced somewhere else in some other spectrum. Fixed links as well, very expensive to relocate them. So that's not a feasible solution. And then lastly, we need to keep a perspective. Why are we doing this IMT identification? The idea is for harmonization. Well, as I have shown you, 20 or more countries have already decided that this is not the spectrum for IMT. So why continue on this way? What would be important is to make spectrum available for Wi-Fi to deliver the benefits that it has been delivering. Thank you very much for your attention. I encourage you to take a look at some of these links here. These are the studies I've mentioned, and I'm always happy to answer follow-up questions either in this meeting or later. So Nigel, back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex. And folks, for your information, we will be posting all the presentations, and even those that might have been made available from the working groups earlier on the event webpage on the CITU site. There's a tab for presentations. They'll be posted under there in due course. I think it makes sense to move right along before we take any questions on this matter to the next presenter, who is Marta Suarez, the president of the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance, who would also be talking a bit about the 6 gigahertz band. So Martha, if you're there, you need to stop.
I am.
Alex is sharing. Yes, Martha, good afternoon. So this is Marta Suarez, president of the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance, and she will talk to us about
Wi-Fi 6.
unlicensed access to the 6 gigahertz band.
Okay, thank you very much, Nigel, and hi everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today. And after such a great presentation from Alex, I will just summarize on some of the important items that I want to present. So I will go very, very quickly with my presentation, and we can use part of my time for Q&A. I think you are seeing my presentation in.
Yes, we see your presentation mode as opposed to the full.
Yeah, let me try again. So sorry for that. Here it is. Let's see if it works now. Can you see it?
Yes, it's better.
Okay, great. So let's go straight forward. So, well, my name is Marta Suarez. Please contact me. You will have these slides if you have any questions or comments. And about DSA, so we are a global cross-industry non-for-profit organization, and we promote dynamic spectrum access as a way to make a more efficient use of the spectrum, to increase connectivity and to foster innovation. So Alex already described some of the benefits. So Wi-Fi 6, we refer to the 6th generation of Wi-Fi. And one of the main advantages is that we have channels up to 160 megahertz. There are 3 different use cases, and we are seeing now adoptions from different administrations and regulators on that they decide to enable some of these use cases. So very low power for applications like virtual and augmented reality to connect the glasses and all the devices. Low power indoor applications that are important not only for home connectivity, but also for industries and factories. And standard power applications that are important for outdoor coverage, and they are relevant, for example, for public hotspots or for campus, university campus, or for dense environments that need outdoors connectivity. Just to have an idea of the performance, if we have a 160 megahertz channel, we can expect to have 2 gigabits per second in a smartphone. And of course, the term Wi-Fi 6E, we refer to Wi-Fi 6 in the 6 gigahertz band. Alex mentioned the benefits of Wi-Fi to the economic as a global analysis. In the case of the DSA, we had some studies about the economic value of unlicensed use of the 6 gigahertz band in some countries in the region. And we found that even if there is no auction, even if the spectrum is provided in a free way or unlicensed access, there is a huge economic impact. Of course, that is related to the economy of every country, but one of the important aspects is that there is an opportunity cost. So it means that if we wait too long to open the band for unlicensed access, then we don't receive the benefits, the economic contribution that we could receive if that spectrum is used by Wi-Fi. And please keep in mind that in this case, we are not clearing, we are not going to a clearance process. We don't need migrations. Unlicensed access is possible to have coexistence with incumbent services in the 6 gigahertz band. Recently, DSA at the DSA Global Summit presented also a report that is done by a company that its name is Asia. And it's very interesting because they are taking information from real networks. And this company is taking data and aggregating, and they are performing analysis of that information. So they have millions of lines in North America and Europe. So this study is mainly for North America, including just Canada and the US, not Mexico, and Europe. And what they did is that they took the traffic for more than 40 global ISPs, big companies, and they analyzed that traffic. And if there is a problem in the quality of the quality of service, what the client is experiencing, then they help ISPs to correct that situation. And what they have observed is that many times consumers fault the ISP for poor Wi-Fi. And let's see the results. In fact, what we have found with this report is that the traffic has been clearly increasing If you see, the red color is 2.4 gigahertz band and blue is 5 gigahertz band. And we are seeing the increase of the traffic in North America and Europe. And here we have information since 2020, since June 2020, and until February this year, but the last month is also increasing. And this is a clear way to see what is important to take actions now, because that behavior will continue in time. And for these markets in particular, it was observed that Wi-Fi traffic doubles every 3 years. So that's why it is really important to enable unlicensed access to attend the growing demand for wireless capacity. But it's not just about Wi-Fi 6E. It's also about Wi-Fi 7 that is going to be the next generation, and where we are going to have channels of up to 320 megahertz. If we just open 500 megahertz for the lower part of the band, that is one channel. And if we open the 1200 megahertz, there could be 3 non-overlapping channels. So it's really having a long-term vision also. There is a powerful global momentum in the region, in the Americas. There are already 8 administrations that have decided to open the entire band. And that means that is really important for the regional market. So there is more than 70% of the market in the region that has decided to, that has made the decision about the entire range. And that is very positive, because then we can have economies of scale for the region, as it generally works, and we can all benefit from those economies of scale. So if regulators in the Caribbean countries decide to move forward, they will immediately benefit from that ecosystem, not only because of the regulations that we are seeing here, but also because there are a lot of equipments that are already available. So I will summarize my presentation. This is the end, just 2 slides. First, 1200 megahertz, it's a really great opportunity to attend the growing demand for wireless capacity. Long-term vision, planning for Wi-Fi 7 and future spectrum requirements. Number 3, meeting the increased demand for internet access, considering the COVID-19 situation. Number 4, economic benefits, even if there are no licensing fees. Number 5, global momentum to make the entire 6 gigahertz band available for unlicensed use. And here I would like to add, next 3 presentations will be about WRC. It's probably important to mention that WRC 23 is not studying the upper part of the band for region 2. There is just a segment that is globally being studied from 70.25 to 71.25 megahertz. Number 6, chipsets and equipment are already available. Last time I was reading, there were more than 30 certified devices for the entire band. Number 7, efficient use of the spectrum. And let's understand what I mean here. It's like we already have services using the band. Satellite, fixed satellite service, fixed service. In some cases, there are also mobile service applications like electronics news gathering. So all those services can continue operating in the band. So that is already the use we have. And on the top of that, we can have unlicensed access, because there is no risk of harmful interference, according to the studies. So that is really efficient use of spectrum. Number 8, if we have more unlicensed or license exempt channels, please keep in mind that here we are talking about shared medium. So we are sharing the spectrum with incumbents, but also with other wireless airline devices. So if we have more channels, it's possible to spread the energy across more frequencies. So there are more possibilities to find an available channel. Number 9, enabling wireless innovation and new use cases for people and companies, like, for example, augmented and virtual reality. There are many applications for manufacturing, for automation. Number 10, airlines and Wi-Fi is a technology that is useful for hybrid networks. So it can use any type of backhaul. It could be mobile networks, cable, fiber, fixed wireless access, satellite. So if we have more spectrum for Wi-Fi, we can use those networks with any backhaul. So if we are in the main cities and we have fiber, that's great, that's amazing. But if we also need to connect people in remote locations, they can use, for example, a satellite backhaul, and then we can have hotspots that are using Wi-Fi. And there are many examples in the region of that good combination between Wi-Fi and other types of networks. And that also creates competition because there will be more platforms and providers. Number 11, it allows different stakeholders to deploy gigabit class networks. So it could be wireless internet service providers, ISPs. It could be also companies that say, look, I want to invest in my own network and I want to do it now. And it's too expensive for me, for example, to have 5G private networks. So I might prefer to have Wi-Fi new generation networks that are really performant. And last argument is immediately available. So as soon as the regulations are there, equipment will be there. You don't need to go through a long process. So that's my conclusion. I would encourage all the administrations to consider and license access to the entire band and to go through the process. I know this Spectrum Management Task Force is already considering this aspect, but it's really important to take actions right now. So thank you very much. If you want to find more information, I invite you to follow those links. There are all the sessions of the DSA Global Summit. And last week, we just had a workshop about the 6 gigahertz band at the European Spectrum Conference. So thank you, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Martha. I think the two presentations were quite complimentary. And I'll open the floor now to any questions that we might have from the floor. Or is everybody sold on the idea?
It's good.
Apparently so. Apparently you're preaching to the converted. So thanks a lot, both Martha and Alex, for the presentations given. Okay. Okay, so our next presentation, we're going to start looking at the WRC 23 more specifically now. And we are going to get a briefing about the agenda from Mr. Carmelo Rivera, who is now a consultant with ACES Corporation. Carmelo is, as he said in his introduction, well known to us here in the Caribbean, having worked with us for many years in both phases of the Spectrum Management Task Force, our work in harmonizing. So Carmelo, I will turn it over to you now for your presentation.
Yes, I'm trying to share my slides here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can you see this now?
Yes, we are seeing it.
Okay, let's go from the beginning. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a good lunch.
Actually, it's showing in your presenter mode. You're not seeing the full slide.
Okay, let me change that.
Convert it or let Martha tell me what she did.
Okay, how's that?
No, it's still up on top. Not up on top, no. Actually, I mean, this is fairly legible as it is, but
okay. Well, I need to go through quite a few slides in just a little bit of time.
Yes.
So hopefully we'll hit all the salient spots. Again, Carmelo Rivera. I now work for the Advantage Consulting and Engineering Services Company. We are sector members of the ITU and associate members at CITU. Now, let me quickly go through. One of the things that WRC 19 did when they set up the agenda items for WRC 23 is someone actually put some thought into it, and they put alike items together. For instance, the mobile, fixed, and broadcast. As you can see, their agenda items 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. 9.1 issues are issues that have to do with the director's report, which will not have regulatory solutions at the WRC, but are to be taken into consideration. And the 9.2 issues, you will see there's a terrestrial and there's satellite systems in the 9.2 issue. The CITEL has split these up. As you can see, the sub-working group 1 will deal with mobile, fixed, and broadcast issues. 1.1, let's get right into it. We already start with IMT in the 4800 and 4990, but we're also talking about protection of stations in the aeronautical and maritime mobile services located in international airspace and waters from other stations within national territories. And to review the PFD criteria in 5.441B, which I will show you here quickly, has to do with before an administration brings into use an IMT station in the mobile service, it has to ensure that this PFD is not exceeded. And you can see the production limits that it has. And it is subject to review. That is one of the things that agenda item 1.1 is currently doing, is reviewing these PFD limits. Agenda item 1.2, here's where we were in discussion. The last two speakers mentioned this. The considering identification of frequency bands in 3.3, 3.4 gigahertz, 3.6, 3.8 gigahertz, 6425 to 7025, and 7025 to 7125, and 10.0 to 10.5 gigahertz for IMT. There has been quite a bit of discussion on this globally. Right now, I will tell you that CITEL currently is only in the preliminary review stage. There have been no proposals brought in yet. I fully expect that there will be some proposals brought in at the next meeting of CITEL, which is scheduled in November. 1.3, we're looking at the primary allocation of 3600, 3800 megahertz to the mobile service in region 1. So I know the Caribbean has region 2 and region 1 countries within the Caribbean. So I know this is important to many, if not all of you. 1.4 is to consider, accordance with the resolution COM 64, the use of high altitude platform stations, and HIBs are, as a matter of fact, the first time I heard about this being introduced was in the Spectrum Management Task Force. The high altitude IMT base station, which would be a HAPS operating in the same frequencies that are already allocated to IMT in frequency bands below 2.7 gigahertz. Some of these are in just regional situations, and some of those frequencies are for global consideration. Okay, then we go on to review the spectrum use and spectrum needs of existing services in 470 to 960 megahertz, again in region 1 only. We're talking on this agenda item. As I mentioned, the 9.1 topics that to consider and approve the report of the Director of the Radio Communications Bureau. And 9.1.3 has to do, again, IMT systems for fixed wireless broadband in the frequency bands allocated to fixed services on a primary basis. 9.2 is looking at any difficulties or inconsistencies encountered in the application of the radio regulations. And 9.2, and this subgroup will consider the terrestrial systems or the terrestrial applications in the radio regs. Then we go to CITEL's WRC 23 subworking group 2, which deals with radio location, maritime, and aeronautical. Again, the agenda items are in order, which I found amazing. It's the first time I've ever seen that from a WRC. Usually you have to skip around quite a bit. 1.6 has to do with radio communications for suborbital vehicles. These are not quite satellites, not quite airplanes. They're just below the space systems, but we are looking at radio communications for those vehicles. 1.7, aeronautical mobile satellite service for both Earth to space, space to Earth directions for aeronautical VHF communications in all or part of 117.975 to 137 megahertz. Excuse me. .8, we go back to something that we've been dealing with for quite some time, accommodating the use of fixed satellite service networks by control and non-payload communications of unmanned aircraft systems. 1.9, Appendix 27 of the radio regulations. And we're looking at existing HF bands allocated to the aeronautical mobile service, and we have to ensure coexistence of current HF systems alongside modernized HF systems. 110, conduct studies on spectrum needs, coexistence with radio communication services, and regulatory measures for possible new allocations for, again, the aeronautical mobile service for the use of non-safety aeronautical mobile applications. In other words, when you're using your cell phone or getting Wi-Fi on an airplane, this is where we're talking about. The GMDSS, we are considering possible regulatory actions supporting the modernization of GMDSS and the implementation of e-navigation. Then we go to CTEL's WRC 23, subworking group 3, which deals with the science services. Again, 112, 113, 114, and there's again a 9.1 topic, which is topic A. Oh, by the way, I failed to mention, if you'll notice, I've put down the coordinators and alternate coordinators for each one of these subworking groups. As you can see, for SGT3, there is still an opening for a coordinator for these subjects. CITU also has need of rapporteurs for quite a few of these agenda items, either rapporteurs or alternate rapporteurs. Anyone that is interested in this, I will also mention that CITU has started a mentoring program. As a matter of fact, thanks to one of our colleagues from the CITU that mentioned quite a while ago that the Caribbean wants to help, but they're not sure how. CITU has developed a mentoring program so that we can teach people how. So the excuse of we don't know how, we want to get rid of that excuse. We want to go ahead and teach everyone how to do what needs to be done. Not only that, but we realize that there's quite a few veteran CITU attendees that are starting to retire. So we want to make sure that CITU continues working as a viable regional organization. So back to 3, we have studies for secondary allocation in the Earth Exploration Satellite Service for spaceborne radar sounders within 45 megahertz. So you notice most of this would be HF. 113, primary allocation, frequency band 14.8, 1535 to Space Research Service. And 114, possible new primary frequency allocations to EESS passive in 231.5 to 252 gigahertz. Topic A, the 9.1 topic A, once again, will not have regulatory solution, but this is studies on the technical and operational characteristics of what is designated as space weather sensors. Space weathers, and we're not talking tornadoes and hurricanes, we're talking sunspot cycles. We're talking about actual interference coming from space, from whatever source. Subworking group 4, again, deals with satellite services. And we're talking Earth to space. on aircraft and vessels communicating with GEOs and the fixed satellite service globally. 116, frequency bands 17.7, 18.6, 18.8, 19.3, 19.7 to 20.2 gigahertz, and 27.5, 29.1 gigahertz, and 29.5 to 30 gigahertz Earth to space by non-GEO FSS Earth stations in motion. 117 is to determine and carry out the basis of ITR studies for the appropriate regulatory actions for the provision of inter-satellite links in specific frequency bands. 118 is consider studies relating to spectrum needs and potential new allocations for the mobile satellite service for future development of a narrowband mobile satellite system. 119 is to consider a new primary allocation fixed satellite service, space to Earth direction, and 17.3 to 17.7 gigahertz in region 2 only. Agenda item 7 is an agenda item that repeats every WRC, and it is in response to Resolution 86, which came out of the Plenipotentiary Conference in Marrakesh. And this is to fix anything in the radio regulations having to do with satellite regulatory issues that may be changed because of the dynamic situation of the technology in satellites. And 9.2, again, the inconsistencies in the application of radio regulations. And in this group, we'll deal with the satellite issues. And we go to subgroup 5, general regulatory. This is what I call the catch-all in the administrative group. Most of these come back every single WRC cycle, such as 2, which has to do with whether or not to update corresponding references in the radio regulations. 4 is to see if there's a possible view to revise, replace, or abrogate certain resolutions or recommendations. Again, the 9.1 issues, one of them has to do with the amateur service and amateur satellite service in 1240 to 1300 megahertz to see if there is a need to have additional measures to protect radio navigation satellite service. And topic D, to review the protection of EESS passive in from 36 to 17 gigahertz. I think it's 16 to 17 gigahertz. And then agenda item 10, which comes back again every WRC issues. This is all the future agenda items. One of the things that WRC 19 did is they came out with a provisional agenda for WRC 27. There's quite a few agenda items that are already being considered for WRC 27. I can provide a list of these, but this is something that I know that at CITU is not going to be considered at least for possibly another year. And upcoming dates, the next CITU PCC2 meeting is scheduled for November 8th through 12th. It is being hosted by Mexico, and most likely will be a virtual meeting. So far, all the CITU meetings have been virtual. WRC 23, the next CPM is scheduled for March 27, April 7, scheduled to happen at the CICG in Geneva, but the ITU is looking for a host country right now. If there is a host country, they can actually move the CPM to a later date. The reason they may want to move it to a later date is the CPM usually happens 6 months before WRC. As you can see, a couple of bullets down, the WRC 23 right now is scheduled November 20th through December 15th in 2023, either in Abu Dhabi or Dubai. They have not decided which one yet. And then the CPM1 for WRC 27 will follow immediately after 18-19 December 2023. Okay, thank you very much for consideration. And Any questions?
Thanks for the overview, Carmelo. In going through just now, agenda item 7, which deals with possibly any changes to the regulations, if I recall correctly. If it is that, and I'm going back to the very first presentation we had this afternoon about the number of satellites and the aggregate impact and so on of all the different types of satellites going up. If it is that some shortcomings in the radio regulations as regards satellite orbits or licensing are identified, is this the item where that you might bring it to for global attention at WRC that that could possibly precipitate some changes?
That is a very good question. I personally do not believe so, because the radio regulations deals exactly with that, with the radio regulations with spectrum. The radio regulations, I do not believe mentions how many satellites you can have in what orbits. So I don't think, and if Amy is still on, she can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that agenda item 7 would deal with orbital spacing or orbital systems.
So this agenda item 7 is not procedural as far as the radio regulations and its appendices are concerned. Which one deals with possible changes to the relevant appendices? Is that the items 9 or some one of those?
I believe it would be item 9, or it would be issue 9, but issue 9 just deals with the director's report, so I'm not sure if it would be even be there. And actually, I'm not even sure if the WRC, if there is a WRC agenda item or placed in the through the radio regulations where you can change that. I've never had to deal with a situation like that in there, and I don't recall seeing any place in the radio regulations where it deals with something like that.
All right, thanks. Something for me to research then.
Yeah, me too.
All right, any questions from the floor? You'll be open to questions.
There's something in the chat there about the mentorship program. Please let us know more about the mentorship program when convenient.
Oh, I'm very happy to do so. As a matter of fact, I chair the mentoring program at CITU. The vice chair actually is the chair of the women's program that CITU has also started to empower women to be more active and to be more representational for the regions at the ITU and in the regions and so on. So we're working hand in hand for mentoring and to empower women at the same time. But I'd be very happy to put out more information about the mentoring program. It's something we have several mentors listed, and each one of the mentors right now has at least 2 students under them, and there's always room for more.
So you would be the person to contact then?
Yes, I would.
All right, excellent. Any other questions right now for Carmelo? I mean, we have the presentation, we'll post the presentation, so we'll have it for reference going forward. And I think what I'll do is start a discussion thread on this to accelerate our discussions on highest priority areas for us. All right, let's leave it there for the moment then. Thank you very much, Camilo. And we'll
Thank you.
To the next presenter, and actually it will be Ms. Suzanne Malloy who is actually from SES, but today she's representing the Global VSAT Forum. Oh, right. Let me just clear the. Yeah, she's representing the global VSAT Forum, and she's also going to talk about regional preparation for the WRC 23. So Susan, please go ahead. Suzanne.
Hi, Nigel. Thank you. And thanks so much for making a space for GVF to participate today. It's great to see so many of you, at least again, over Zoom. Hopefully we have a means to see each other in person within the near future.
Indeed.
Since Carmelo has covered each and every one of the WRC issues, it's great because in the interest of time, GVF just wanted to focus on a few issues that I think the task force has seen before, but they're worth bringing up again and focusing on as we continue to consider them during the year. So let's see if I can get my...
And we also have some new participants in the task force, so.
That's great. Okay. So it'll be new to some of you. So I'll go over a few key messages. We're going to focus on the C-band uplink and downlink agenda items that touch on those, and also the agenda items that touch on eSIMs, or stations in motion. So I'll start with the key messages and then go into each one a little bit. For agenda item 1.2, that covers the use of a portion of the C-band 3600 to 3800, the consideration of it for IMT, basically 5G systems, international mobile telecommunications. The concern that GVF has, and we've expressed it in multiple consultations throughout the region and in many fora, is that where you have ubiquitous services, there's a serious risk of IMT disrupting critical satellite communication services that are already deployed, have been for decades in the 3600 to 3800 megahertz band. What the services are that we are concerned about, it just covers a huge range of currently delivered services in C-band by satellite. It can be for broadband or enterprise markets, our provision of high-speed internet protocol trunks. And this includes for government and e-government solutions, for example. Definitely in the pandemic, we've seen satellite systems covering, making sure that every citizen was reached where we have coverage, which is the unique ability of satellites to do. And the pandemic just highlighted how none of that can be taken for granted anymore. That communication capacity really must be there to fully serve citizens. Also mission critical services like aeronautical communications, air traffic, of course, emergency response and disaster recovery, which there's a great experience of that in Caribbean, and access to free TV content and pay TV content. So they're very important services that are being provided. For agenda item 1.2 on the uplink, this item is considering identifying frequencies for IMT that are used by the geostationary fixed satellite service for uplinks. And our concern is that they be preserved for global mobile satellite service systems as well, so that there's still the forward possibility of establishing new feeder link stations in the 7 gigahertz band. Previous studies have shown that there just really isn't potential for IMT operations to protect these uplink operations. So going into a little detail on agenda item 1.2, or the consideration of IMT in this band, in region 2, there is sufficient spectrum in almost all of the region in this range, in the range below 3600 to 3800. So that additional spectrum isn't needed to meet, for IMT to be able to meet the 5G goals for the foreseeable future, and to have the participation of 3 to 4 competing mobile network operators for each country. by 2025, and these are GSMA estimates, there will only be 7% of connections projected to be 5G, while there's still this big push to make sure that populations across the region are being connected by 4G, which satellite is serving well today. And that 4G is projected to account for still 2/3 of connections in the region by 2025. Or I should say at least 2/3 of the connection, to the extent that they're still being rolled out. In Central and South America, there is generally access to the 3300 to 3600 band for IMT deployment. So that's the reason for this perspective that we have. As I mentioned, there are lots of mission critical networks that are relying still on C-band solutions. There's high availability in the C-band. Satellite service itself is really, really resilient. And so for the kinds of services or uses that C-band is being put to, video distribution, aeronautical, emergency response, telehealth, those are really important qualities, and C-band is important for that use. What we've learned over time is that sharing between the FSS receiver stations and IMT stations in the same band isn't feasible, and it's not practical in the same geographical area. Moving on to, there's one more thing about just to mention for the C-band, I've skipped over really fast, I'm jumping. For the C-band uplink, 6725 to 725 in region 1 and 725 to 7125 in all regions. This is a band that's used by uplinks for the geostationary FSS, and that we are really concerned should be preserved for global mobile satellite systems, so that in the future they can continue to establish feeder link stations for their operations. Again, there are many mission critical networks and applications relying on non-geostationary MSS mobile satellite service systems. If there were a deployment of ubiquitous or mobile IMT 5G user terminals, it would be problematic if these terminals are deployed in areas used by feeder link stations for the mobile satellite service systems. And again, as I mentioned before, there's not a whole lot of potential that's been seen in these studies. There isn't potential for these operations, if they were 5G IMT, to be able to protect FSS uplinks. Just to go back to one of the key problems with downlink operations and compatibility with IMT is there isn't a possibility for coexistence, because these receivers are susceptible to in-band interference, adjacent band interference from out-of-band emissions emitted by 5G transmitters, and also from low noise amplifier overload. These sharing issues aren't just border issues. In trying to introduce mid-band IMT in ways that allow full use of FSS operations, because it would have to be below or separate from any bands in which FSS is operating. Satellite services can complement IMT, so that the local, our view is that the local IMT regulations need to put in place measures that protect from these kinds of, sorry about my camera, put in place measures that can protect the FSS operations from both in-band and potentially adjacent band interference. Those measures fall in 4 categories: having adequate guard bands, having inbound band power limits for IMT operations, having out-of-band power limits on 5G emitters in the form of a maximum PFD limit, and also knowing that earth station operators may need to implement in-band filter capability to better resist blocking or overload. In the region, the US approach has been holistic in this way in terms of determining those measures that need to be taken in adjacent bands. Another recommendation that we would have would be registration of C-band antennas as an important part of any successful introduction of IMT in adjacent bands. For global mobile satellite systems, there have been multiple consultations in the region over the past year. And GBF in the uplink bands for C-band has advised governments that the regime that's been adopted by the European Communications Commission decision is the one that best promotes coexistence of RLANs and Wi-Fi networks with fixed satellite service to the extent that it can minimize the risk of harmful interference to FSS. Only in Europe have compatibility studies been conducted on the potential for aggregate interference to FSS from millions of devices that you would have in any Wi-Fi deployment across multiple jurisdictions. For members of GBF in the Americas, these studies have convinced us that operation of Wi-Fi devices should be limited to indoor use for low power devices. They also leave us very concerned about leaving open the possibility for millions of new devices in outdoor environments. Moving on to eSIMs. The agenda item 1.15 addresses possibility of dedicating additional spectrum to GEO eSIMs in 12.75 to 13.25 gigahertz band or to space. This is essential to address the growing demand for on-the-move connectivity, whether the services are provided on earth stations, on aircraft, or on vessels. This agenda item would consider enough spectrum to potentially double the amount of uplink spectrum available for KU in-flight and maritime services. One thing we've noticed in our own service in a different band is that on maritime vessels, sometimes the ratio can be different. There's much more uplink than downlink. So that for some eSIMs, it's really, really important to have additional uplink spectrum. These studies are being conducted with the assumption that this additional spectrum will not impact the Appendix 30B allotments or assignments or limit the usability of allotments or assignments, and should protect terrestrial services that operate in the band. Also considered for on the agenda for WRC 23 or eSIMs in the KA band from non-geostationary satellite networks. Again, there's really strong demand for broadband connectivity on the move, whether it's maritime or aeronautical or other uses. And this agenda item would allow a globally harmonized framework to support affordable, ubiquitous connectivity while guaranteeing protection to existing services and existing systems. NGSO constellations offer the additional advantage of being able to provide both high throughput and low latency. And there's a clear need, since there are examples within GBF membership of these services already having been introduced. So there's a clear need for a framework globally for Ka-band NGSO eSIMs to address this demand for connectivity. Takeaways, agenda item 1.2, to the extent that it posits introduction of IMT in the 3600, 3800 band in this region, would create the serious risk of disruption of critical communication services by IMT, ubiquitous IMT, at a time when there is an adequate spectrum identified for IMT in mid-band. On agenda items 1.15 and 1.16, they will create the possibility of identifying enough spectrum or needed spectrum to address the growing demand, strong demand for communication services to aircraft and vessels from both GSO and NGSO constellations. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that in the Ka band, 28 gigahertz portion of the Ka band, there's still a strong push globally and at federal and regional levels to promote the introduction of 5G IMT in that portion of the band. Despite the fact that WRC 19 allocated over 3 gigahertz, just below 28 gigahertz, at 26 gigahertz to IMD, with the possibility to accommodate 3 to 4 competitors. This is still a focus. So what we would urge the administrations to consider is that an interpretation of our tables in the region to allow ubiquitous mobile systems in that portion of the band. 28 gigahertz would mean the lower portion of 28 gigahertz band would mean either limiting FSS to certain areas, antenna diameters, or creating additional interference scenarios between existing services and new services. So we welcome any questions on that or any of the topics that we introduced today. And certainly we'll expand this list as we consider more items in this cycle, WRC 23 items in this cycle. Thanks so much for, again, for having us participate.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Any immediate questions for her from any of from the floor? Hands raised. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. All right, well then, thank you very much, Suzanne. We'll leave it there for now. I guess questions would come subsequently. Just a reminder to send, oh, no, I think I saw a hand. Milicia, sorry. Are you there?
Thank you, Nigel. Right,
yes.
Suzanne.
Hi, how are you? Oh, she's on mute again.
No, yeah. I'm back. A call just came just as I said hi. I'm back. Okay. Thank you. Right. So Suzanne, my question is about I know the FCC did an auction, which I think was it last year? It was about last year. And it was for C-band. So I want to better understand what that means for the alliance, for the global VSAT, the global satellite forum. Because the FCC has already indicated, I would imagine, that portion between 3.6 and 3.8, which FCC had a wider range, that is something, spectrum that is available for actual mobile service for IMT.
Thanks for the question, Milicia. So unlike most other regimes or administrations in the region, in the US, the 3300 to 3600 band isn't available in the US for IMT. In the US, there has been deployment of Department of Defense radars. So there are separate arrangements in big portions of that range in the US. So it's unique in that respect. So if the question is, trying to put that in context, that's the context for why we're emphasizing that there's adequate spectrum, because most other countries in the region do have access to that range. But in the US, that is not available, so that their decision to auction a slightly different range has very much to do with that unavailability where it is being deployed generally in the rest of the region.
Okay, so I understand you, Suzanne, to be saying that in the US, I believe it's 3.3 to 3.6 gigahertz is unavailable. So you're saying that there's a potential, the possibility that there wasn't enough spectrum there for IMT, and so they had to look into some other range, but in the rest of the region, it is available. So in the rest of the region, there is availability of enough spectrum, but perhaps this wasn't the case in the US. Is that what I should understand if you're saying, or am I? Yeah.
Right, in the US, there has been access to terrestrial services in the 3300 to 3600 range, but it had to be done in a very particular way due to the presence of DoD radars.
Thank you, Suzanne. So good to see you.
It's so good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any Other questions for Suzanne? Any other hands? All right, we'll move along then. And I'll invite the presenter for the last presentation for today, who is Davina Rawat from representing the GSMA. And she's also going to talk to us about WRC 23 issues related to mobile services. So, Dina, please go ahead.
Hi, Nigel.
Yes.
You can hear me? Good.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, let me share the screen and get my presentation out to you. I guess you share.
Yes.
You can see that. Let me make it in the presentation mode. Okay. I'm with you now.
Yes, we are seeing it.
Okay, perfect. And you see my presentation. So,
yeah.
You know what, being the last presenter, I'm just debating myself whether I just comment on the other presentations because I went to chat a couple of times to make my comments. So, and then I kind of resisted myself and said, no, let me wait for my turn and maybe I'll make my comments then. So, here it is my turn. Let me start by saying, before I start making comments on the previous presentations, let me start by saying that, you know, Nigel, really, on behalf of GSMA, thank you very much. You always invite us to the CITU meeting and we appreciate it very, very much. I also thank Carmelo for introducing all the agenda items. So that's wonderful because, you know, you are already briefed on the agenda items GSMA is focused on. And that's what I'll be talking about, what the WRC 23 issues are for mobile services, and some of them you have heard already. So I have two choices, you know, make the comments now on some of the comments made earlier, or just go to my presentation and then remember to bring those comments. So let me do that, and that may be a faster way of doing it. So let me move on then. So spectrum, we know you know, for 5G, we need the spectrum. We need the spectrum in low band, mid-band, and the high capacity bands, which are the millimeter wave bands. WRC 19 was quite successful in providing the millimeter wave bands, but not the low band and the mid-band, and hence we created this agenda for, you know, the agenda items in the WRC 23 for the low band and the mid-band. Suzanne said there is sufficient capacity in the mid-band. I would love to see some evidence of that, even in our region, because if you really look at the mid-band, we're looking at mid-band from 3300 to 3800. That is 500 meg. And if you look at 3GPP and any other standards, the channel bandwidth required is about 100 meg. That's the only mid-band right now. So 100 meg, 4 operators, 500 megs won't cut it. And then as Suzanne mentioned, 3300 to 3400 not only is not available in the US, it's not available in many countries. Okay, Canada also works with defense radars and many other countries. So that's not the only reason why Canada and US have gone up beyond 3.8 gigahertz to open up the C-band. I should also mention, and I think Melicia's question was so much to the point, that the US auction, I think brought, if I recall correctly, 71 billion, highest ever paid auction for the spectrum, which was between 3.7 to 4 gigahertz, 280 megahertz of that. So if you look at the numbers and calculate your pop per megahertz, you know, you will find that that was the highest amount of money received for that. So the mid-band spectrum is very, very much valued. Canada is also going to open up, you know, the same amount of spectrum up to 4.0 gigahertz or 4,000 megahertz, not stop at 3,800, although WRC only goes up to 3,800 megahertz. The second band in the mid band is 4,800 to 4,990. It's a NATO band too. You know, Suzanne mentioned 3,300 to 3,400. Yes, it's on the agenda, but there are other uses, and it's not region 2 countries have got some restrictions. but we are hoping that at the WRC 23, we will get rid of them, or we will work around them rather, not get rid of them. 4800, 4990 being NATO band. Yes, it provides 190 megahertz, but it's not available everywhere. Right now, we have two countries, if I recall, Paraguay and Uruguay in the footnotes having that band. And let's see what happens at WRC 23. It is a good piece of middle band spectrum. Don't get me wrong, but its availability, we have to make sure that the other NATO operations and everything is managed for. And then the 6 gigahertz, I've got a slide on 6 gigahertz, and I'm going to come back to it because you have heard a lot about 6 gigahertz today. Okay, but one other comment I want to make here is, so I don't forget the low band, is, 2015, I keep telling my colleagues at the, in your region, Nigel, in CITU, that they were the make or break for the 600 meg proposal to go to the conference, to have, in the CITAL, to have a common proposal from CITAL to go to ITU to have 470 to 698 megahertz identified for IMT, while making sure that the broadcasting will continue and the amount of spectrum broadcasting needs will continue. And, countries will decide that, like, when they want to make the transition, just like we are doing digital dividend 1. Every country had a different date for transition depending on their national requirements. Same will continue, but the WRCs don't happen every day. So let's get that 600 meg identified for IMT in 2015. Well, we only managed to get a handful of countries, and that includes some of the Caribbean countries. Either for the allocation or both the allocation and IMT identification, which I would just remind you that there are 3 Caribbean countries right now where they have the IMT identification in the low band. Why I talk about the low band is it is the best coverage band. Your number of base stations you require, the infrastructure you require to cover a large piece of area, that is your best coverage band. And if you run out of 700 meg, you won't have anywhere to go but 600 meg. So we didn't really succeed very much in 600 meg, but now agenda item 1.5 is only for region 1. And this debate is happening in region 1, which is, as you know, is EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, right? And this debate is happening whether there should be IMT identification in part of the band or not. Do we need, going forward, long-term, the whole spectrum 472, not the 960 meg, but 472, 698 or 694 meg. Do we need it for broadcasting in the long term? What happens is if region 1 gets through that and has IMT identification, region 2 only has a handful of countries and 3 Caribbean countries, 3 Caribbean states. And region 3 has no problem because region 3 has got the mobile primary allocation, and IMT is just an application of mobile, and they can go any day in 470 to 698, depending on their national needs for broadcasting. So something for the Caribbean states to think about. If they think they need the coverage band, the low band, the 600 meg band, what should we do through we can't have a common proposal from CITAL, but what could we do as CITAL members collectively to be able to address that? So I just want to leave it there, something to think about, and I'm really, it's close to my heart, and I'm very much available to provide any details anytime to anyone. So coming back to my next slide here. So here is the WRC 23 agenda for mobile services is complex this time. It's not one agenda. It is, as Carmelo noted, 1.1, which is the 4800 to 4990 megahertz. That is at least considered globally, as you can see. It's, in all the regions. The other bands are on regional basis. So we have a number of bands to be considered under mobile service, other for IMT identification, and we have regional differences, and hence we have agenda item 1.1, then we have 1.2, which also differentiates some of the items in the region. Then we have 1.3, which is only for region 1. So I'm not going to focus on 3600 to 3800 megahertz. And then we have 1.5, which I just finished talking about region 1 for the low band. So let's park 1.5 separate, and 1.3, which is again, region 1 has got the MS, only mobile service allocation, and region 2 has the IMT identification. So see these differences at the detail level in these agenda items. But from GSMA perspective, our interest is all 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.5, all of them, because we think globally. But just looking at our own region, we're looking at 3,300 to 3,400. Suzanne said it will be critical disruption if 3,600 to 3,800 meg happens for IMT for our region. Well, as I already mentioned, a few countries have already identified, Canada, US, and others are considering. In Europe, the band is already identified for use for IMT. So that is just telling you that ITU is playing under 3,600, 3,800, this particular band, catch up. It's a catch up for reflecting the reality which is going on in the radio regulations. It's not a good thing for the ITU to do. Radio regulations should always be leading it, and they do. But in the C band, we are constantly playing catch up since 2007, WRC 2007. So 3,600 to 3,800 is absolutely an essential component of the mid-band and is needed, but that only provides you 200 megahertz. 4 or 5 operators, 100 meg will not cut it. 4,800 to 4,990 is not available everywhere. So what are we going to do about it? So then we have 200 meg, no, 400 actually, 3,400 to 3,600 is already existing. And we get 3,600, 38 globally. And let's see what happens to the 3,300 to 3,400. We're talking total C-band 500 meg. To say that that meets the needs, and if an operator gets 100 meg channel, 100 meg piece, they won't know where to go if they needed more than 100 meg. Hence, the 6 gigahertz becomes extremely important, extremely important. Unfortunately for our region, the 6 gigahertz is only, as you see this chart, is only the top 100 megahertz of the 600 megahertz is for global consideration. The rest of the 6 gigahertz band, which is shown here, 6425 to 7025 megahertz, that is for region 1. So when I show you this separate chart where you can see this 6 gigahertz, I'll make a few more comments. The 10 gigahertz band, it's really getting into a capacity band, millimeter wave band type of operations, small cells, not coverage, capacity, mostly capacity, and smaller cells. In the last column, as Carmelo said, that there are other issues under agenda item 9, we call them topics. And there is a topic of 9.1c, which is shown at the extreme right of my slide here. And that is, can the IMT technologies be used in the fixed service bands? Can we make that as a general thing? And it's for your information, it has become very difficult and controversial issues in the WRC 23 preps in the ITU, because folks are concerned that you can't have all the fixed service bands and say, we are going to use their IMT technology. So we need to kind of scope this to make sure that that's not the case, that's not what it's implied. and deal with this, but it has become a difficult issue. Okay, moving on. Yeah, I thought I would just give you some flavor of what's happening at the ITU in terms of the specific agenda items from 1.1 to 1.5. 1.5 is dealt with by the broadcasting group, but any IMT use has to be dealt with in terms of providing the information about IMT needs in this band by Working Party 5D. So what the IMT needs are going to be, this Working Party 5 Delta is the key working party, is the working party in the ITUR dealing with the IMT. That's what their raison d'etre is, that's what their mandate is, okay? So Working Party 5D is going to be providing information to the broadcasting group, which is study group 6, to say what the needs are going to be for IMT in this range, in the low band. And as I said, it's only for region 1. If we want to do anything for region 2, we need to think creatively. And we can talk about that creative thinking. 3300 to 3400 for our region, it is for IMT identification, and slight difference for region 1. They are just going to be looking at the existing footnotes. 3600 to 3800 is again dealt with, for IMT, hence dealt with by Working Party 5D. So all these bands up to 10.5 gigahertz are dealt by Working Party 5D. The reason I'm mentioning this is that Working Party 5D just finished on 18th of June, if I remember, their meeting, one of the meetings, which lasted 10 days. Started as some of the sessions, offline sessions, started at 5 a.m. for our people, in our part of the world. And I give credit to the people, who participated in those offline. I did not at 5 a.m. But why were these 5 a.m. sessions there? In the context of IMT, these sessions were there because the biggest discussion which was going on up until the June meeting of 5D was, what are the parameters? What are the characteristics of 5G, of the IMT in these bands from low to mid to higher than mid, which is millimeter wave? What are the characteristics? And where we were stuck since last few meetings of 5D was the deployment parameters. The deployment parameters for C-band, i.e. 3300 to 3800 megahertz band, and the deployment parameters for 6 gigahertz. These are not coverage bands, but they can provide some coverage, but they are not coverage bands as we talk about the coverage bands 700 meg or the bands below 3 gigahertz. So the discussion was, what are the deployment scenarios? Are we going to have rural coverage or some cells in rural area where, it's needed to deploy the C-band? Why the deployment? Because the deployment density determines the amount of interference the satellite services or other incumbents sharing some of these bands would receive. So I'm really happy to say that after all that hard work of all the people from industry and the administrations, that the June meeting was able to conclude this whole debate on IMT parameters and IMT deployment characteristics, etc. It's done. And why it had to be done is because ITU, well, because you can't do any sharing studies with IMT. You can't really assess the impact of using of any of these bands for IMT on other services if you don't know what the parameters and characteristics are. That's one thing. It's essential. The second thing was that the deadline of ITU, previously it was 23rd of June, 2021. For all the services except, for all the services, the deadline was 23rd of June, 2021, this year, which is gone by, to finalize the parameters, characteristics of all the services for which sharing studies will be done, which are on the agenda of WRC 23. Because of the virtual meetings and the pandemic, the deadline got changed to July 23, at least for most of the services. And because of this deadline of July 23 and the goodwill of the participants, we were able to conclude at the June meeting the IMT characteristics and the parameters, and they are available on the ITU website. It's a temp document 422 if anybody wants. And otherwise, certainly I'm one email away to provide this information. So all this to say that we have just completed what the IMT in these bands would look like. So to have some comments from my colleagues, my friends, to say that IMT could not use 6 gigahertz or could not share with 6 gigahertz. I just want to highlight that sharing studies have not started. Yes, it's recognized there are incumbents. Yes, it's recognized there are fixed satellite services, both in the uplink and the downlink, including the feeder links for MSS, and you have heard in the previous presentations. Yes, it is recognized significant interest of unlicensed Wi-Fi. But to say that one part can share and coexist with the incumbents and the IMT cannot is at this point in time not a complete argument. Let's wait for the sharing studies to be done. The characteristics are there now, and then we will talk about it. Okay, so moving on very quickly here. This is what the chart shows you on the amount of spectrum which could be available in the C band. And as you can see, 3.4 to 3.6, I said 200 meg is globally harmonized. Thank God for that. We did that at 2015 WRC. 3.6 to 3.8 is on the agenda, and 3.3 to 3.4 is on the agenda. And it's only going to provide you 500 megs. Not sufficient. Need some way to get beyond this if we're going to be, providing the mid-band capacity for 5G, and hence the need for the 6 gigahertz. You heard, and I'm not going to say a lot more about it because I've already made enough comments about the 6 gigahertz, but this is a very simple chart, shows you the whole of 6 gigahertz, and you heard from my, colleague and friend Alex and Martha Suarez, and my greetings to them. Haven't seen them for a long time. They talked about the whole band, and they talked about the large need for the large channels, 360 meg channels, and hence the need for the 1200 meg. I agree that some countries, particularly in our region, have opened up the 1200 meg. The technical rules are different. They vary a little bit, indoor use versus outdoor use, and that kind of thing. So devil is in the detail. But Europe has only gone for the lower portion, and the upper portion is for WRC 23 discussions. So our thinking at GSMA is that, folks, let's look at the sharing studies. Let's look at what the possible options are for IMT in this band before we prematurely, with incomplete information, close off, the discussion on IMT identification in the upper 700 megahertz, which only 100 megahertz is global. So that's my message is for the 6 gigahertz. So anyway, I think ITU, as I said, is playing catch up for some of these parts of the spectrum. it's got a chance in WRC 23 to close off the, some of these issues, because they are the only ones who can provide globally harmonized bands. So mid-band capacity, we have an opportunity to get the C-band sorted out between 3.3 to 3.8 gigahertz. We have an opportunity to get some low frequency band, at least for region 1, and anybody else interested, if they come in with interest, we see what happens at WRC 23. It's not on the agenda for coverage. And unless we get these coverage bands and the harmonization, this whole issue of digital divide, which if we ever felt, we definitely felt it during the pandemic. The affordability issue for getting this access to the remote and rural areas, the harmonization is a key. We're hoping that ITU at WRC 23, ITU is us, ITU is administrations, ITU is you guys, the Caribbean states, and your administrations and your regulators. And we have a chance to go to WRC 23 and get it right on the C-band issue, which we have been discussing since WRC 2007, possibly on the low frequency coverage band, which we have been discussing since, I don't know, 2012, 2015. This chart basically says, I have been talking about the 100 meg channels in C-band. Why do I talk about 100 meg channels in C-band? Studies have been done, and they are showing that unless you have 100 meg channels, you go to 60 meg channels, the number of cell sites increases by 64%. What it does to your infrastructure cost, only the operators can talk about. That's why it is really important to get this mid-band the right amount of spectrum and for its growth. And WRC 23 is the only opportunity. The second thing is, based on some of the studies we have done on the socioeconomic benefits, the 5G, I think Suzanne said that in LATAM, it's by 2025, it will be only 7% of the subscribers doing 5G. The global numbers are 20%. So if we get the 20% of the connections, all the connections will be 5G. You need spectrum for that. And if we do additional 300 meg, the total benefit is about 50 billion. We do 700 meg, we have the benefits going to 80 billion. And there is a lot of calculations and assumptions behind these numbers, and they are available from GSMA. So basically, to sum up, this is what GSMA is working on. Our focus is on agenda item 1.2 in this C-band 3.3 to 3.8, 6 gig, and on the capacity band 10.5 gig. Our focus for region 1 is on the low band 470 to 960, but it's primarily 470 to 698 in the sense that 698 to 960, there are IMT identifications already. I did not touch on this Article 21.5 review. It is a complex issue. It is a provision for transmitters, it's a provision in Article 21, which limits the transmitter power into the antenna. That's the best way to describe. And this provision was written when we had the, passive antennas. But now we have active antennas. And for these active antennas, there is this Article 21.5 review is going on. It is a complex issue. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to get into the details of it, but certainly it is Working Party 5D has spent a lot of time, and we continue to spend time. How do we reflect the transmitter power into the antenna when you have this X number of active elements, active antenna systems? So again, here it is the example where the radio regs have to catch up with the technology. And active antennas are being used in all the bands, many bands, about 3 gigahertz for IMT.
Your time.
Okay, so this is my last slide. Thank you, Nigel. So study group 5, which is Working Party 5D, is part of study group 5. They are also, as I said, this is a complex conference, 3.6 to 3.8 for region 1 is only for mobile service allocation. Although in Europe, it is identified for IMT use, but the agenda item is only dealing with mobile service allocation. So it is not dealt with in Working Party 5D. It is dealt with in another group of study group 5. And another group, another group of study group 5 is also dealing with 4800 to 4900, 4990 megahertz, because of the aeronautical and maritime radars in this band, I should say radars or aeronautical and maritime services, I should say, which includes radars. So that study group 5 has got 3 working parties dealing with the agenda items 1.2, 5D, 1.3, 5A, and then 1.1 Working Party 5 Bravo B. And then there is major discussion on the broad issue on agenda item 1.5, because 470 to 960, it has a big chunk of spectrum allocated to broadcasting, but it is being looked at region 1 long-term needs for broadcasting, and then including region 1's needs for IMT. That's what the GSMA focuses, and we are hoping that the WRC 23 will address these issues 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.5, and there would be sufficient, the outcome will be sufficient mid-band spectrum available for 5G and low-band spectrum, at least for colleagues in region 1 for 5G. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Nigel.
Okay, thank you very much, Vina. If you have the link to that temporary document you mentioned handy, if you could post it in the chat, it would help a lot. I see a hand from Suzanne. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Don't kill me.
No, hi, Vina. It's good to see you.
Hi,
I'm just laughing. I'm thinking, well, Vina's making sure that we do not let anyone go to sleep at the end of our, just because we're the last presenter. They cannot sleep on us. So thank you. Thank you for riveting our attention, Vina. So just on, and it's good to see you.
Always, always.
So just on the point about the need for IMT spectrum in the C-band downlink, I mean, again, from GVS point of view, there's still a huge amount under consideration, understanding that GSMA is looking at this on a global basis. And a point, because Vina raised the US as well as Alicia before, just a note that the US was only able to open up bands above 3600 by providing a massive investment in additional satellites, not to mention migration, but in additional satellites that could preserve access to satellite services as against the spectrum that was lost to the scale of the reallocation to terrestrial 5G. And then on the uplink band, with respect to compatibility studies, there have been ITU-R reports, ITU-R report 2367 and ITU-R report 2368, addressing aggregate interference into FSS uplinks from terrestrial services. So I would leave it to the engineers to review the work that's been done in the context of what's being discussed today.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Alex, you wanted to say something?
Yes, thanks, Nigel, and thank you, Vina, for your presentation. It's good to hear you, and perhaps we'll meet soon. I just wanted to clarify one fact that Vina alluded to, but I think hasn't expanded upon, and that is the studies in the 6 gigahertz band. We have spent over the last 4 years studying the sharing in the 6 gigahertz band. The fact that a number of administrations in Region 2, including Brazil, Canada, United States, and others, have proceeded with regulatory action to make it available for unlicensed access means that they have done the studies. They did not proceed without doing the studies. So unless Vina expects the laws of physics to change by WRC 23, the sharing conditions aren't going to change. And the sharing conditions are quite stringent. They are either operations indoors or operations at extremely low power, basically conditions that are not compatible with IMT services. So we can study this for the next 50 years. Things aren't going to change as far as the protection of the incumbents. And while waiting for the outcome of WRC 23, significantly disadvantages countries that don't take advantage of this spectrum and availability of the technologies, as Martha already explained. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Can I?
Thank you, Alex. Yes, Vina, you could get a.
I can't change the laws of physics. I am a physicist, so I would not be changing my laws of physics, and they won't change by W23. Not at all, Alex, as you say. And I am not saying that those big channels and the diversity you need for those, large channels, you don't need, not at all, or undermining the Wi-Fi, which I'm using myself right now. What I'm saying is that Europe may have done the studies. Studies are studies, and studies are based on assumptions. ITU, as you know very well, Alex, would have a series of studies. I don't know. I'm hoping that they are ABCD. They say studies in terms of study ABC, and let's hope they are not going to go to A to Z. I hope that many studies won't come. And they'll come with different results, and we'll rationalize it. And WRC 23 is not that far. So before we decide on a service which is unlicensed, once you decide on it, I was the former regulator in Canada for almost 3 decades, okay? That tells you my age, okay? It's not 100 years. That unlicensed spectrum was taken, the need was recognized, but was taken very seriously if you're going to open up a band for unlicensed, because you cannot take it back. We opened 900 meg for garage door openers, and then there was interference to D&D radars. We couldn't take it back. The radars had to move, if I recall. So what I'm saying is that we have to be careful in opening up the spectrum for unlicensed. The need for Wi-Fi, the need for IMT is there, but the lower band, Europe has done cautiously. The lower band is open. The upper band, let's look at the studies. Let's see what's possible. I will say in the same breath to my colleagues in CITU that the GSMA interest in 6 gig is not just IMT. The band, including in your states, in the Caribbean states, I'm sure, is used for backhaul. And our interest is obviously to protect the backhaul from Wi-Fi, as well as to protect the backhaul from IMT. Now, when you say when I say protect the backhaul for IMT, it kind of becomes in the same family, because the MNOs are running the backhaul and MNOs are running the IMT, and backhaul comes under fixed service, IMT comes under mobile service, and most of the release of spectrum for 5G these days is flexible use, so they can decide within their own family whether, you know, if some IMT location is going to cause interference to a backhaul, their backhaul, they can decide. So that's not the concern, but the concern would be definitely, you know, from unlicensed systems, because those unlicensed systems, if the interference is there, it is really difficult to find. So because you don't know where it's coming from. They are not, I know in the 5 gig rules, for example, Canada, if I recall correctly, went for light licensing in the sense of some registration in part of the band, just for that reason, that if there is interference to, if I remember, it is in 5150 megahertz to global star feeder links, there was a recourse. But pure and simple unlicensed does not provide that. And I think that's all I'm saying. Wait, see what happens, what the studies are done, compare them with the European studies. Europe will bring them. And then let's see, you know, beyond WRC 23. In the meantime, your Wi-Fi 6E is working. It's got, you know, you have the lower 500 megahertz. That's all I'm saying. It's not a, you know, counter there. Okay, it's
okay. Let me give Martha the last word, and then we'll have to wrap up. Martha, quickly.
Thank you very much, Nigel and Dina. It's also a pleasure to see you.
Likewise.
I would just like to mention about that coexistence. That was the reason why I presented the 3 use cases. And I think Dina was correct on explaining that there are different rules for every type of usage. And I think that is the important aspect. What we have seen in many, by many administrations is that they have rules that are different. So if we talk about very low power devices, we are talking here about 14 dBm, 17 dBm. So that is really 25 milliwatts for 14 dBm. So that is really very low power. And that's why we can have coexistence with the incumbents. Then in the case of low power indoors applications, they are just indoors, as the name says clearly. So they will have all the attenuation of the building, and they are not creating interference to the incumbents. And there also the power levels are very low. We're talking about 24 dBm in most of the countries. And then for the case of outdoor applications that are standard power devices, we have clearly indicated that in that case, we need an AFC. So it's an automated frequency coordination system. And in fact, in the region, if we see only Canada and the US right now have implemented standard power applications using AFC. The other countries have decided to move forward with very low power applications and low power indoor applications that, because of the type of rules they have, after all the studies of coexistence, we have found that they don't produce any harmful interference. And that was the same decision, the same conclusion in the US and in Europe. And about the studies, I would also like to mention, we recently, there are 3 countries in the region that haven't finished their decisions. One of them is Mexico. And in the case of Mexico, DSA had some studies, very detailed studies about the coexistence with fixed links and with fixed satellite service and with all the incumbents. So that study is published in our website. So I can share the link here if someone wants to take a look at that. That is pretty recent, and that is for the region. So I will share the link here. And yeah. So I think like if administrations decide to move forward, they can do it choosing, of course, the ideal would be to have all the use cases, but they could also select some of the use cases that don't need, for example, automated frequency coordination, but we know that works also. It's just a matter of time. So anyway, I just sent here the link, and thank you, Nigel, for this moment.
Thank you, folks. We will leave it there for this afternoon. There will be other opportunities in future as we delve deeper into the specific agenda items and so on. But I think we've had quite a lively and engaging set of presentations and interactions between the presenters as well. So thanks to Viasat, Wi-Fi Alliance, the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance, ACES Corp, VSAP Forum, and GSMA for your presentations this afternoon. For those who have not already done so, please send us a copy of your presentation so that we can post it for the use of the task force and also benefit persons who might not have been able to attend this afternoon. The only thing left is for me basically to kind of hand back to the chair, the task force chair, for any other business and any thoughts that he might have with respect to wrapping up. So, Alvin?
Yes, thank you, Nigel. And I'd like to echo your sentiments and gratitude to our industry stakeholders for a very detailed presentation, which will help us in our deliberations on all the matters relating to spectrum usage. Just like to express my gratitude to everybody for joining online today. And just to let you know, Nigel, they're about to throw me out of the office, so I must run because we have a hard stop at 4:30.
Okay.
So yeah, so I have to run, and I would like to express my appreciation to you and the rest of your CTU colleagues, as well as the ASG. Express my gratitude to him for hosting this forum and bringing us together, not in person, but as we all know, in the virtual space, so that we could collaborate on these very important matters and hopefully get some traction as we prepare for WRC 23. I'd like to say thank you and wish everybody the best and stay safe.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much, Alvin. Folks, that's pretty much what we have for today. Looking forward, I'll ask you to keep an eye on the CTU website. There will be developments, there will be further developments. If you look at it now, you will see there is space for discussion forums. What we'll do is make space for specific discussion fora in the spectrum management space, and an opportunity for the working group leads to continue the work and discussions in between meetings. So just to thank everybody again for attending, I'll say what we will do is we will circulate the notes of the meeting.
Nigel?
Yes.
Just quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Recognizing that you recorded the entire thing, because I had to leave it in between. Yeah. Where would the recording be available? When? Where?
Well, we can make it available on the same event website. This is typically what we do on this CTU on the CTU website. So you have the link to the web page, right, where you registered, where you'll find the presentations and everything. We can post the video there as well. All right?
Okay. Yes, thank you.
That's where it would be available.
Okay.
All right, but thank you very much, folks, for the participation. Hopefully, with the additional features via our website for discussion and so on, we'll be able to accelerate the pace of achievement of our plans for 2021 and in future as well. All right, any other comments from anyone or questions? Okay, not seeing any. Thanks, folks. We will close off now and see you all next time.